What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Water Cooler Talk. My name is Caleb Turner, and I'm a sports writer at KSL.com. Joined here once again on our last show in February 23rd, joined by Jackson Payne, repping his Washington Commanders tonight, of course, and repping a little Cougs there in the background too on the hat shelf. And we're feeling pretty good about the Cougars right now. How are we feeling in general tonight, Jackson?
Dude, it's always a wonderful Sunday to spend with you. But yeah, what a week for BYU. I mean, got my 1996 throwback logo hat behind me.
Yeah.
I like to represent all the teams that I have interest in. I mean, obviously BYU I cover, and there's a lot of fun watching BYU this season. But yeah, it's this past week. I mean, we'll dive into it later, but like, you'd be hard pressed to find a better week of regular season action that BYU has ever had. Just because that was, I mean, holy cow.
Yeah, it definitely will not take us very long to get to that because honestly, other than that, not a whole lot going on in the state. But we will start with our highest profile of sports, as we usually try to. Little Utah Jazz and Hockey Club coming back from their respective midseason breaks. Jazz start 1-1 after the All-Star break, and the Hockey Club also 1-1 after their Four Nations break. Now, a bit of a different situation for both these teams. Jazz don't really want to be going 1-1. They want to be going 0-2 in this kind of situation. As far as tanking and lottery odds are at right now, it's essentially come down to a three-way battle for the last two spots in the top three between the New Orleans Pelicans, Utah Jazz, and Charlotte Hornets, because your beloved Washington Wizards have all but secured the worst record in the NBA and will have, great odds at the number one pick.
Which they
However,
won't get because they're the Wizards. It won't happen.
yeah, there's, it's only 14% odds the number one pick, 52% that you'll get in the top four. So hopefully you get it
Look,
there.
Cooper's going to be a Spur. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off right now. Like the
Look,
NBA wants Cooper and Wemby together. Come on.
there was some sad news that went on in my private life this week relating to the San Antonio Spurs. We're not going to get into that too much here
Calling
because
it calling it your private life. I don't know why that was fun. Just like your secret closeted fandom. Just my my
yeah,
my, my
I
affair
mean,
with the Spurs.
it really isn't that private because I do talk about it a lot on Twitter X. So, um,
Everything happened.
like Pib X, Twitter X, it's like, there's a lot of X going on. Lil X. Anyway,
That's fun.
um, so as far as those odds go, one of those three teams, the Pelicans, the Jazz, or the Hornets, are not going to have the best odds at the number one pick. Now, who that may be, it might come down to the final game. Who knows? They're all three are at 14 wins right now. And the Pelicans, on the one hand, want to win, I think, because they don't really, I mean, they have a centerpiece in Zion and a couple other guys that like they want to win with. The Jazz and the Hornets, on the other hand, I mean, Hornets, you could maybe make the argument with LaMelo, but also like they've been sellers in the trade market just as much as any other team. So we'll see. The Jazz definitely need to keep making it a priority, trying to play younger guys and, I mean, frankly, not win games. I appreciate it. And I feel this. I share this sentiment that Walker Kessler is basically the bellwether for whether or not like the Jazz win a game or not. Like if he rests, it's basically a guaranteed loss, and if he plays, like they're actually really competitive.
Yeah.
I think Andy Larson pointed that out on Twitter last night because Walker Kessler played in two games in a row, like for the first time in a very long time. And so, do what you want there, Jazz. I don't like you don't want to tell guys to lose games, obviously. But these are, very narrow margins we're working with here when it comes to the best odds. So it might come down to some things there. But on the flip side, the hockey club, they're on the other side of wanting, they want to go 2-0 instead of 1-1 because they're now within 4 points of the final playoff spot in the Western Conference in the NHL. So it's right there for the taking. We've talked, ad nauseum about this hockey club and their young players and how they're kind of right on that fringe of making that jump to becoming a playoff team. And it's looking more and more like they can put the pieces together. They get a guy like Logan Cooley back. They've already gotten Dylan Gunther back. They have these pieces that they need. Hopefully, they can stop giving up goals. That's obviously been an issue all season. Giving up leads, giving up, honestly, like kind of insane amounts of goals at times. They've given up like six or seven goals in some games, which is not what you want. So if you can solve kind of a little bit of that defensive issue, um, but still find the goals, then we'll see if the hockey club can make a run into that final playoff spot in the West. So, any thoughts real quick before we jump down to college? Any pro sports thoughts here, Jackson?
Yeah, just a hockey club that got a big win today, obviously beat Vancouver, but sneaky, sneaky important development for Utah is Sean Dursey's back, and he's been
Yep.
gone for a long time.
Yep.
And I remember when he got hurt, our writer for our beat guy for the hockey team, Brogan Houston at Deseret News, was telling me he's like, that's a dagger. Like you can't afford to lose that guy. He's their best scoring defender. Like he's and with how bad their defense has been at times, when you lose probably your best defender, it's either him or Sergachev. If
Yeah.
you lose one of your best defenders, you're done for essentially. And so the fact that they're still in the playoff race and kind of treaded water without him is pretty impressive. And so if they can get him back and he returns to form right away, that's such a big that's almost like making a deadline deal. That's
Yeah.
almost like buying at the deadline without having to give anything up. So you get a guy like that back, that's huge. So I'm excited to see what they can do with him back because man, how fun would it be in this state, kind of like coming out of March? Let's say BYU wins a tournament game, Utah State makes the tournament as well. You know, March is such an exciting time in the state of Utah just because college basketball is such a big deal. But coming out of March, how fun would it be going to April if the hockey club just starts going on a playoff push and games are playing? I mean, they're playing meaningful games and they're getting close, tight, electric wins. And I mean, it would just be so awesome to see a playoff run in Utah because the Jazz have become allergic to that. So it'd be fun if hockey got into it because playoff hockey is the best. I think Utah making the playoffs sooner rather than later helps in the long run with building that culture, building that fan base that we've talked about in the past. And so if they made the playoffs year one, and if Dursey really comes back and Cooley comes back and you know they just start playing the way that they're capable of, I mean, it's going to be a really exciting next few months for hockey. So let's hope they make the playoffs. It'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a novice when it comes to like reading like the NHL standings and like points and all that. But what I'm looking at right now, like it seems like it's not totally out of the question that the hockey club could have a playoff series against a team like the Dallas Stars or the Golden Knights because they're like kind of those top seeds in the West. And like if you're trying to start a rivalry with an expansion team, there's no better way than having a good playoff series against a team like the Vegas Golden Knights that are like your closest. I guess them and Colorado would kind of be your closest rivals. But even Dallas, I know like I feel like one of the games I had a chance to go to at the Delta Center was against the Dallas Stars. Obviously, they're a great team. Have been in deep they've made deep runs the last few years. So would be really exciting, like just to get a kind of a higher profile team and something that means a little more in that potential playoff series. It's not a sure thing. Like I said, Utah's still a few points out. They have to rattle together some wins. They can't keep going 500. You gotta put together some winning streaks. So we'll talk about that more certainly as it gets closer. Hockey club right around, just past the midpoint of their season. So still a lot of hockey to be played. But just like you mentioned, you get into April, you get into May. You want there to still be some meaningful sports being played here in the state of Utah, and hopefully that can happen. And moving on to meaningful sports being played in spring in the state of Utah, let's talk about college, our college basketball teams. BYU men's basketball, just a massive week, like you mentioned. They've won 8 of their last 10 games, including back-to-back ranked wins over Kansas and Arizona, with one of those coming on the road. And so I guess, I mean, you weren't there in Tucson last night, I'm assuming. But as just kind of obviously there were a lot of takes and kind of things shared on social media last night. There was the whole, the school had to come out and apologize for the chant that happened from the Arizona student section there after the game. Some other parties got involved in kind of calling for this kind of thing to stop when it comes to BYU games. Certainly, I feel like gotten a lot more attention over the last couple years. But when you're winning, it kind of solves everything, and like nobody can really say anything to you when you're winning. And BYU's in a spot right now where Boscovich can, hold up the L as he's leaving the court, and like you can justify it.
Yeah, that was a spectacle at the end of the game. I mean, it's why is it always the former Pac-12 schools? Like Oregon got in trouble, USC got in trouble,
Yeah, it's true.
Stanford got in trouble, as we both know. Arizona State got in trouble. Now Arizona get like what is it like? The Pac-12 hatred for BYU just can't stop. But yeah, hopefully hopefully the Tom Brady Snoop Dogg stop hate commercial
Uh,
really sinks into people's hearts
yeah.
and, and they take that to heart. But yeah, just I mean we can get into that side if you want, but I prefer the actual basketball side because like
100%,
it was
100%.
just, it's a bummer to me because this I can't think of a better like single regular season week of BYU basketball. I mean, obviously we're younger, so like we didn't grow up in the WAC days or we missed a lot of the Mountain West glory days. But
Danny
like,
Ainge and all that. Yeah.
yeah, but like aside from maybe like Jimmer being on the cover of Sports Illustrated
Right.
and getting name dropped in Lil Wayne songs, Obama and Kevin Durant tweeting about him. Like aside from that kind of, which is like off the court like culture stuff, like BYU like went straight built this weekend or this past week. Like
Yeah.
BYU beat two certified blue bloods. They destroyed one at home in like a historic blowout. And then they went on the road in one of the tougher environments to play in the conference, and they beat the other one. It was a controversial ending, but like take that away, and it's probably a top three college basketball game of the year, just across the country. Like it was electric. Neither team could miss a shot. Just really high level offensive, exciting basketball. And they do both games on ESPN, so the whole country got to watch BYU just flourish. And so they're peaking at the right time. I think a few weeks ago we talked about on this podcast how we don't really there's still so much we don't know about this BYU team, and I feel
Mm,
like it's kind of revealed itself over this past stretch where BYU might not be as good as they've played lately just because teams get hot and these things happen. But like BYU's a really good team. They might be the best team in the state. I mean, Utah State's been really good, but like BYU's going to be ranked tomorrow. I don't know if Utah State will be, but BYU definitely will be.
yeah.
People are paying attention. They're a prolific offensive squad. Their rebounding metrics are really high. I mean, they play really well on the glass. They've improved so much defensively. Like I don't think we value how much improvement we've seen from this team defensively. They couldn't stop anyone downhill earlier this year, and now I mean they're tough. There's an attitude with this team. There's a confidence to this team. They don't flinch ever. I mean, it's been really fun to watch. Kevin Young's kind of hitting his stride, and I mean, you got to feel for a guy like AJ DeBanza who's watching this BYU kind of having a moment on the national stage, like, yeah, this is why I'm here. Like, kind of
Yeah.
doing the Leo, like pointing at the TV, like, yeah, like, see, I told you guys.
That's where I'm going. I'll be there.
And then you see these transfers. I mean, from a lot of these high profile squads that are going to be entering the portal next year, and
Mm,
it's like, okay,
yeah.
like, I want to play with AJ. I want to play in the Marriott Center, but what an awesome like. I was on another podcast earlier this week, and I said last year when BYU won at Fog Allen when they beat Kansas on the road, that was BYU's like welcome to the Big 12. Like, hey, like this team is worthy of like this team's here. Like, welcome to an awesome basketball conference. You just had your first signature moment.
Yeah.
This year, beating Kansas and then I guess Arizona now is like this is BYU's like arrival to the Big 12, where it's like, all right, we're not here to mess around. We're a contender to win championships in this league. I mean, coming to Provo is going to be tough. We're no slouch on the road. Like, so I think BYU did a lot for its reputation nationally and within the Big 12 this week, and just awesome basketball, man. I mean, Richie Saunders, if BYU wins a tournament game, he's going to be a household name in the country across the country. Kava Kate has been really fun. Yegor is still just one of the greatest passers we've ever seen at BYU. Dallin Hall's playing really good basketball. Cannon Catchings came off the bench yesterday and was awesome. Just so many guys I mean, they run an 11-man rotation, which is so,
Crazy. Yeah.
and every single one of those dudes is contributing in a high level, especially, I mean, look at Trey Stewart. I mean, remember
Yeah.
when we were on the beat together, Trey would like take over practices as a freshman. Like he would go like Jimmy Butler, Timberwolves close practice against like Barcelo and Gideon George and those guys, and he never saw
Yeah.
the just Pope
Yeah.
never figured out a way to use him. And Kevin Young, I mean, I think Trey Stewart's like the perfect example of like what Kevin Young's been able to do with this roster because he took nothing and turned it into something, and not only something, but like Trey Stewart comes in and like clamps down one of the other team's best offensive threats, and he makes threes when he needs to. It's just like it seems like he has a knack for the big moment, and it's such a little thing, but like then you get guys like Mag, you guys like Kaba, like guys like Cannon, just Kevin Young keeps his guys ready for the big moment. He just like there's something magic with this BYU team in the air right now, and Kevin Young's doing an awesome job. What a great week! You'd be hard pressed to find another week as good as this that BYU just had. But And now they're comfortably in the tournament, which, I assumed they'd be kind of riding the bubble into the conference tournament and need a win or two to kind of get over the edge, but they are comfortably in the tournament field. Some people are making graphics about it, which is cool, but
Ticket punch, baby. We're going dancing.
taken punched. It's just nice to know we're going to be seeing March basketball at BYU and it's not at the NIT because I do not want to go to Orleans Arena. I think that's where the Final Four is in the NIT. So
Ayo. Could be lit. I don't
uh,
know.
I just word vomited a lot and it ended at Orleans Arena. I don't know what just happened there.
That's where all roads lead to the Orleans Arena, unfortunately.
That's
At,
the
at
most depressing thing I've ever heard.
at some point or another. For those who don't know, that is where the old West Coast Conference tournament was played. So I've spent a couple evenings there, and it's been fun.
It is the worst.
It's got like a really like a lot of casinos in Vegas, like the carpet is just like fascinating choices going on. Like it's got like this red but like weird designs all over it. Anyway,
It's
and
like it's like 90s Seattle Supersonic coded colors, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, true.
Anyway,
But there two things kind of came to mind as you were talking. Number one, like you mentioned, we didn't really know who this BYU team was, and I agree to an extent. And I don't want to my own horn too much, but I remember pointing out a couple months ago, or maybe more like a month ago, that like consistently, like top scorer was Richie Saunders, top rebounder Keba Keita, top assist guy Yegor Demin, and like that's basically continued to be true even in these wins. If Yegor can get up to those 7, 8 assists, if Richie is reaching 20 points, if Keba is active and reaching 8, 9, 10 rebounds. That's like a really really good recipe for success. All around, you've kind of got this a more balanced team. The 11-man rotation is very interesting, and I do wonder, with a guy like Kevin Young, he came from the NBA. The NBA is obviously a professional league. These guys are getting paid for it. There's a certain standard that is set for the lot from the first guy on the bench, from the star to the last guy on the bench. And I think I'm guessing that he employs a similar kind of expectation with BYU, where it's like, hey, I mean, and they even are they are getting paid at this point with NIL and everything. Players are getting paid, and I think the expectation of readiness has gone up a bit. Like, hey, if we're gonna give you a scholarship, if we're gonna help you out to get this money and get this kind of spotlight on you, you have to hold up your end of the deal and be ready when your name is called. Trey Stewart, Mag, like you said, these guys down, you go down the roster, even if you're not going to get drafted into the NBA, there's a certain expectation that like, hey, you got to bring in 100% all the time. If not, we can fill that spot. Like they can easily fill that spot with somebody else, like a transfer guy, like you mentioned, somebody coming in as like a walk on or whatever it might be. And so I do wonder if like that expectation of just like professionalism has carried over for Kevin Young.
100%. I mean, that's what Kevin Young said he wanted to do when he got to BYU. He wanted to turn into like an NBA factory. And with all the personnel he brought in with NBA backgrounds and NBA ties and then bringing in these players, that's exactly what he's done. I mean, there's a sense of professionalism there. It's very much people know it's kind of Belichickian in a
Mm,
sense. Like
yeah,
people know their job and they do it. Like Trey Stewart has a defined role and he does it perfectly. Yegor Demin has his defined role. Richie Saunders has his defined role. And I'm trying to what was I gonna say? I think another thing with and like you said, like when the expectations are high, there's accountability too. Like Cannon
yeah,
Catch when he signed with BYU, he was the number one recruit BYU had ever brought in. And then obviously AJ came along, but
right.
Catchings was no slouch. He was a legit prospect. And he's kind of had an up and down campaign a lot because, the coaching staff isn't really they don't really want to ride on his recruiting prestige. It's what have you done for us lately, And so
Yep.
when he has defensive lapses, they take him off the floor, and you see Trey Stewart or Mag or Dawson Baker get run. And then when Catchings is dialed in, I feel like it's almost like it almost turns into like a baseball game. Not to
Mm,
over analogize this, but like Kevin Young has kind of turned into like a playoff baseball manager with like a bullpen where like you never know who's going to come in with the 11-man rotation. You never know who's going to come in. There's no real rhyme or reason to the subs. Like I know Mark Pope loved letting like the computer kind of determine when he subbed in and out,
yeah.
and you'd have these weird like set substitutions. Like Caleb Lohner would have like 15 points and then not play for 30 minutes, and it's like what just happened? But I feel like it's like when you're trying to coach against the subs for Kevin Young, it's like, all right, am I getting a Dawson Baker who can score from anywhere on the floor, or am I getting a Trey Stewart who's going to clamp down my best offensive player? Right?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like it just kind of keeps you on your toes, and it's part of the chess match that makes college basketball so riveting from a coaching perspective. And so, I mean, Kevin Young he's really grown into this role. I think earlier in the season, like there were some growing pains, but he's kind of BYU's peaking at the right time. And I think a lot of that
Yeah.
has to do with what's going on the bench. And one thing I wanted to get into with yesterday's game, kind of diving into the game itself, for the longest time this season, we didn't really know who BYU's like go-to guy was
Right.
in time. I remember when they played Utah on the road in overtime, they went down low to Foose a bunch, and it's like,
Mm.
why? Like, I love Foose, okay? Man, I love Foose.
Yeah.
But
We know.
but but like, why is Foose your go-to guy? Why is your backup center your go-to guy in crunch time?
Yeah.
Last night, out of that timeout, 13 seconds left or whatever it was, Richie Saunders was the guy they gave the ball to, and it shouldn't be a surprise because he's their best offensive player. He's probably a first team All Big 12 kind of guy. He's an NBA player, it looks like. But the fact that BYU knows, like, okay, this is the guy we're going to with the game on the line, that's big for March.
Mm.
And and going into the foul call, obviously, like,
Yeah.
I don't think it was a foul. I mean, from one angle, it looked like a hip check. From another, like, it's such a weird, like, real time thing.
That's very brave of you.
But I don't know if it was a foul, but because that had been called consistently as a foul throughout the game,
Right.
because that was the 39th foul in 40 minutes, you have to call that as a foul. If you're gonna call that, you have to be consistent. And so personally, if I'm Billy Crystal wearing the ref's outfit,
I love that you posted that. I was like, "What?"
it's the best. He threw Kareem out of his farewell game. Greatest scene ever.
So good.
But it's so dumb. But I don't know if I'd call that, but the fact that they called it throughout the game, you got to be
Yeah.
consistent. And you know what? Like, good on Richie for like looking for contact and making those free throws too, because given BYU's free throw luck in recent years, like
Mm.
there was a non-zero chance that he was going to brick both of them. But
Right.
I saw that look on his face on the ESPN cameras, just that like quiet assassin look. Like he's like, oh yeah, like as soon as he got fouled, I was like, yeah, Richie's gonna win this game here. Like of course he is. Like that's exactly what's gonna happen. So it was electric. But yeah, what a blessing for BYU to know who their guy is in
Hmm.
time. Like when they're playing Kentucky in the first round in the absolute cinema showdown of Pope versus Kevin Young and they're down one and they need a bucket coming out of timeout with like 6 seconds left. You know it's gonna be Richie Saunders and it's gonna be awesome. And I think they had Nell coming down cutting underneath too. I
Yeah.
think it was open and like so that's the thing. Like Kevin Young after the timeout last night was
Hmm.
awesome. Like his coming out of the timeout game with how he was calling plays was just he couldn't miss. And so like I said, BYU is peaking at the right time in every aspect, offensively, defensively, and coaching. So what an awesome combo going into March. I mean, there's no reason why this BYU team can't make some noise in the Big 12 tournament too. They don't really need to. Like they already have their ticket
Yeah.
punch in March as graphics have shown.
Yeah.
Uh, when you go into an environment like that and you're as hot as you are and you have nothing to lose, why not just screw around and make a run? So it's going to be really fun to watch BYU come down through the rest of the regular season and into March.
Yeah, so the other piece to kind of what you were talking about, obviously you mentioned the now being, quote unquote, a lock for the NCAA tournament. The other team that is, based on what I've seen, a lock as well would be Utah State. You mentioned, is BYU better than Utah State? We don't know yet. Obviously different conferences, different schedule and all that. But it is good to know that like it looks like we're gonna have once again two basketball teams from the state of Utah in March Madness in the NCAA men's tournament. So shout out to the Cougars and the Aggies. The team it looks like that will be missing out on that is Utah men's basketball, who did complete the Kansas sweep with Kansas and Kansas State, but ended up losing on the road at UCF tonight. So not a great look there. They're kind of trading wins and losses, which is not where you want to be at this time of the year. Utah women's basketball, on the other hand, they also picked up an L, ended their 7 game winning streak with a loss versus number 24 Oklahoma State. Could have been a big opportunity for the Lady Utes to pick up a ranked win there, but then they did beat Cincinnati by 27, which is what good teams are supposed to do. So we shall see. Looking like Utah women's basketball should be a tournament team, not quite in that ranked category yet, but looking like probably the best women's team in the state. Utah State, as I mentioned, men's basketball took care of business at home versus San Jose State and San Diego State, and are now looking like locks once again for the NCAA tournament. I think someone posted it's something like They've made the tournament with four different coaches over the last 5 years, which is just like an insane stat. So shout out to the Aggies for just continuing to pick up great coaches off the waiver wire. And lastly, that you're gonna love this. It is soccer season now.
Oh yeah,
For
fire me up.
those who are into that.
Yeah,
It is my main assignment covering Real Salt Lake and the Utah Royals. One of them started their games this week. Real Salt Lake losing their first two games, and did not score any goals over those two losses. So not a great look there for your Claret and Cobalt.
at least the new RSL kits are cool though. I
The
like
new,
those.
the new RSL kits are very cool. Grid City kit, because as we know, Utah is the only state that has a grid system in there with their streets.
Minecraft USA baby.
Yeah, yeah. And as we look ahead into this upcoming week, Jazz and Hockey Club with a couple little home stands. So if you're looking to hit up the Delta Center, you might want to check these out.
Be there on
Ja
Tuesday.
There you go. There you go. Starting out with a little Jazz, 5 game homestand starting Monday, tomorrow against Portland. But more importantly, the Hockey Club 3 game homestand starting Tuesday against the Blackhawks. So I that's who they played in the opener, right? So it should be another fun one.
Connor Bedard. I mean, anytime you can go see, honestly, like the first year of hockey, my motive to going to games is see as many like NHL greats, NHL
Yeah.
superstars as possible. Gotten to see McKinnon, gotten to see Crosby, gotten to see Ovechkin, obviously, and now I'm going to see Bedard. Like it just and trying to collect them like Infinity Stones. You know, just this is Utah's NHL introduction. Let's see as many stars as possible. Stable of stars.
And one day, maybe one of your tweets will be featured on a milestone graphic about one of those players, like Ovechkin, even. Who knows?
Hopefully, if you know, you know.
And moving on to what's up next for this BYU team? You mentioned they had, possibly the best week ever this past week. Well, they've got another chance to actually pull off another state sweep. First they did the Kansas sweep. Now they can do the old Arizona sweep. We stole the Coyotes from Arizona. Now we can steal a couple wins
And
from
Kevin Young.
Arizona.
Ke-
And
Kevin
and
Young
and Kevin Young.
Kevin Young returning to Arizona and getting 2 wins in that state at BYU would be kind of cool. But yeah, they got to go to Arizona State. They beat them handily earlier in the season in Provo. That was kind of the peak of Arizona State season, and they've just kind of slowly and loudly plummeted from there. And they just Brandon Davies, their leading scorer. He's not on the team anymore.
Hate
So
to see it.
so yeah, they're kind of now. I look. I'm on a Bill Simmons kick, as you know. So I'm a little nervous about the Ewing theory factor to it. Like
Okay, okay.
Arizona State loses their leading scorer and plays better without him. Like that's
Yeah.
definitely a possibility. But like BYU's a buzzsaw right now. I just don't see. Look, you can ratio me all you want if this doesn't happen. Anyone listening, but like I just don't see a scenario where BYU, as hot as they are, loses to a team declining as fast as Arizona State is, right?
Mm,
Like it just feels like BYU has all the momentum. And then so they got to go to Arizona State, and there's gonna be a ton of BYU fans there. You know, there's a bunch of LDS people in Gilbert and Mesa and Chandler where around Tempe, you know. So there's gonna be a ton of BYU fans there. It's gonna be a split crowd. It's not nearly the atmosphere it was in Tucson. And then you got to go home, play West Virginia. Anything can happen in that game. I mean, that was a close game in Morgantown, but BYU should take care of business there. Then you go at Iowa State. That's going to be tough. And then your home Utah that's going to be a meaningless game for both teams. Whereas where Utah's not going to make the tournament,
yeah.
BYU is like, so BYU, I mean, they splitting this past week would have been awesome to sweep. I mean, and I wrote in my column last night, I said, people are going to argue about seeding about BYU because of the whole no Sunday thing and
Mm,
resume versus other teams' resumes. And at this point, it doesn't matter what seed they're at
yeah.
because they're hot. They figured something out. They're impossible to guard. I mean, no matter who they play, as long as they're not playing like Auburn, which they're not, right? Like,
Right.
shout out Howard or whatever 16 seed is going to play them. But what you call it? The BYU, like, no matter who BYU plays, like, they're going to put up a fight. It's going to be a great matchup. BYU's going to play well, it seems. And so, I mean, last year BYU was a 6 seed. They lost to Duquesne, but they came in slumping, and Duquesne came in really hot. Like
Exactly.
BYU is the hot team now, it appears. So
Yeah.
you could talk about seeding all you want. It's a waste of time. So it's going to be an awesome opportunity to see how BYU finishes the season. And Arizona State, like if they lose to Arizona State, something's amiss. But I don't foresee that to be the outcome.
Yeah, and then as things have kind of happened over the last week, Utah also playing the Arizona teams just like they were playing the Kansas teams last week. So Utah men's basketball at Arizona on Wednesday, and then home versus Arizona on Saturday. So a couple big games for the Utes to try and string together a couple of wins when they've struggled to get back-to-back wins last little bit. Utah women's basketball at number 17 West Virginia on Wednesday. Huge game for the Lady Utes, and then at home versus BYU in the regular season finale Saturday at 1:30 at the Huntsman. So big game for in-state rivalry. You mentioned also that BYU and Utah men's teams playing later on, so should be a fun kind of end of the regular season for college basketball here in the state of Utah. And lastly, I'll go Utah State men's basketball looking ahead at Boise State and then also at Colorado State. So a little bit of a road trip for those Aggies as they look to cement what could be an interesting seeding process for them as well. Obviously, you go into like the conference tournament and stuff as well, trying to figure some things out between them, San Diego State, all that, figure out who comes out on top there.
I have a hot take, or at least like a hot question, I guess. Is Utah State kind of, I mean, they looked like they were going to run the Mountain West this year. They've kind of fizzled off a little bit, but they're still in a really good position. Do you think that was necessary in order to keep Calhoun another year? Do you think that made him less of a hot
Yeah.
candidate to keep Logan? Because I think that, I mean, how awesome would it be if they had the same coach 2 years in a row? You know,
Yeah, it hasn't happened a lot recently, but I will say you'd be hard pressed to find a more Utah name than Jared Calhoun,
it's true.
especially spelled
He spells it.
Jerrod. So
Gerard. He's
that's a very
awesome.
Utah name, and it sounds like he wants to be here too. Like obviously for coaches, you want to kind of get into a high profile spot. You want to get into the spot where you can kind of build your program the way you want to. But
Yeah,
also you've got to kind of value stability at one point. You've got to value, being able to grow with guys, bring in guys, and kind of grow your team with them. So we'll see. He mentioned last night after their game that he's planning to stick around. So and like
there
you
you go.
meant, like you say, like maybe if they don't lose a couple of those games, it's harder for him to stay.
I feel like Danny Sprinkle was kind of like this perfect mix of like he was such a dogged individual, like he was all about the next stop and like
Yeah,
leveling up, but also he was such a good coach and such a hot name that like teams were aggressively pursuing him. And so like when you have both of those things, like a deal's gonna get done faster and he's gonna leave town sooner. Whereas
yeah.
Calhoun, like I don't think he has that same like
Sprinkle,
he doesn't have
sparkle.
he doesn't have that same like doggedness, like
Yeah,
needing to go to the next step. Like I think he's, but also like if he was if he was a hotly like desired name, he wouldn't feel that urgency to leave.
yeah,
But I feel like it also just cools the pressure a little bit considering they've lost a few games. But like they've had a great season. Just the fact that they're going to make the tournament with another coach is such an awesome outcome for them. Like I did his intro press conference for Deseret, and I was so impressed by him and just it's mid-major basketball is the best. It's one of the last pure things we have in the college sports landscape. The Mountain West is an awesome league. The Spectrum seems like such a cool place. Just everything about Utah State basketball is awesome. And so I don't say that like I mean I would love to see them go on a run. They're due for a Final Four run at this point because they're in the tournament all the time and they never make it. Their tournament history and BYU's is like eerily similar.
yeah.
So at one of these years, one of those two schools is going to go on a Final Four run the way Utah used to. So
And they're doing it with a bunch of local guys too, which is cool to see. You got Mason Falslev, who's local. Even Cache Valley local,
oh yeah.
and then their starting point guard went to UVU, Drake Allen. So, just
You
really,
too.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, super cool story there. Hopefully, both those teams can make a bit of a run. Lastly, as far as our look ahead, I mentioned RSL dropping their first two games. Well, those are both on the road. They come home this week for games at America First Field Wednesday and Saturday. And lastly, for our winners and losers, these are going to be a bit predictable because it's stuff we've already talked about. But for our winners, it's got to be those two college basketball teams that locked up. Um, March Madness berth this weekend in BYU and Utah State. And for the losers, RSL, you gotta score a goal. You score a goal, you'll maybe get into our winners if you also win the game. And potential losers, watch out for this one. could be the state of Arizona. Like we
Oh,
mentioned, you lose the Coyotes, you lose Kevin Young, you lose to BYU, could also lose to Utah this week. So if you just take a bunch of L's, it's looking a little rough for our guys down south.
and please lose the Diamondbacks. Give us the Diamondbacks. We'll take
Yeah.
great care of them. We'll love them more than you do.
They were just in the World Series 2 years ago, though.
Yeah, but like no one went. No one cares about the Diamondbacks in
Hey,
Phoenix.
hey,
Like,
don't say nobody cared about that World Series because my Rangers won that World
oh no.
Series.
I'm
So
not look, I'm not dogging the Rangers. I'm just saying no one in Phoenix cared. Like that was
yeah,
you could get tickets to World Series games for like $200, which is nothing.
they have field side pool seats.
We could do that in Salt Lake.
Good luck with that. You want
Take Riviera hot tub, put in Salt Lake, put in right field for new MLB team. Just put the Provo in MLB.
no, what they really need to do is just put it like do it like the Great Saltaire and just
Oh,
put it like right on the lake and just
that'd be
you
so
know what I
sick.
mean? It would be so stinky. It would
Home field advantage. The smell just like
dip,
just
dip.
get a bunch of COVID survivors. It's Moneyball, but you only sign COVID survivors. Signing like Tom Hanks and who else? Elder Gong had COVID. Like
Oh
sign.
yeah. Okay, real quick, we have 2 minutes left on the Zoom call, but you met Elder Gong a little while ago.
Yeah, I mean, well, I've known him for a while. He's a
Okay.
family friend. He was my dad's seminary teacher back in the day. He was our family's bishop. So I've met him before. Like I've known him for a while. But my dad's gonna be a official government chaplain,
Oh, that's right.
and so he had to go to church headquarters, get endorsed, like get set apart by general authority. And so while we were there, we popped on by to see our friend Garrett, and it was a lovely time. So
The only time I've seen him was when he was exiting the Delta Center after a Jazz game. So he's one of us.
Garrett loves spacing. He loves he loves transition offense. He loves all that thing. So my calling at church right now is I coach young men's basketball.
No way.
Oh yeah, it's the best. I'm 4-0 with my deacons team and I'm
Let's
0
go.
with my priest teachers team.
Okay, okay. Mixed
All,
reviews.
all mixed reviews. All four losses have been like single digit losses, so it's been tough, but we're getting there. I hope they don't can me, but
Who is your Richie Saunders? Do you have a headband kid?
dude, I don't have a headband kid.
Ah,
I have a kid who like broke his arm and still played. He like took his sling off to
okay,
break his knee.
respect.
But yeah, I told Elder Gog, I was like, hey, my calling, I'm serving as a young men's basketball coach, building the kingdom on the court. And he's like, oh, that's perfect for you. So, I'll take that,
Shout out Garrett, shout out Chaplain Rusty, and shout out, hoops, shout out triangle offense, whatever we need to do,
Chaplain Russ.
Yeah. All right, thanks you guys for sticking around, and we'll catch you next time.